Thank you for joining us today. And welcome to the Black Lives Matter Town Hall. And I'm Maisa Arias, and I work with the Pachamama Alliance team. I'm sheltered in place in San Francisco, and I'm here with my colleague Josh Wolf, who is going to be supporting us in just holding this space for you and our beloved Rev D as we get started in our time together. Welcome everyone. A couple of disclaimers for me as we shelter in place and we find ourselves doing everything from the same place. I have a 10-month-old baby who you're gonna hear here and there, and I have people moving, my neighbors, so it's a little noisy here, but I'm gonna try my best to keep muted and really give space for you and Rev D to have a dialogue and a conversation. Okay, well, you may or may not know this, but this space is part of a series of conversations that Pachamama Alliance created that is called the Resilience and Possibility in These Times. And it all started as a response to COVID-19, and it now is extended to create a space for dialogue and conversation and exploration about the current global upheaval and uprising that's demanding the racial justice for communities who for centuries have suffered from systemic racism. So we've expanded the conversation. This is not the first one of them that we have around social justice, and we're honored to have this space here today where we want it to be more interactive between Rev D and you all, and I'll say more about that in a moment. I do want to thank you all for making it a priority to join today. And I do say that as Maisa, who speaks on behalf of Pachamama Alliance, and I also want to say it as a woman of color who lives in a country where she was not born, and who is the mother of a 10-month-old who is growing up in a space that is in a moment of transformation, I will say. That is not easy, but we're here, we got a job to do, right? There's something for all of us to do, and I really thank and honor all of us for saying yes to being part of the exploration of what's our role in this moment, and how do we want to show up in this moment. And with all of that said, and before I go ahead and introduce Rev D, I want to invite us to just drop in and connect with ourselves and space and all of life for a moment. So if you would, please close your eyes. If that's not comfortable for you, you may lower your gaze and connect with your breath. Just pause for a moment and connect with your breath. As you connect with your breath, I invite you to notice that, just scan your body and notice what is the part of your body that when you think of and connect with justice, injustice, with liberation, what is that part of your moment that gets lit up? What is that part of your moment that wants to do something about it? It might be your heart, it might be your guts, it might be your mind. If it's all of them, bring them all together and breathe into that. Because that's where your commitment to showing up in these times in the best possible way, that's what needs to be fed. That's what's going to guide you, your commitment. Your openness to listen and to learn. your openness to transformation. And as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, connect with guidance that's outside of you. Connect with guidance and openness to be guided by our ancestors. Greater guidance that you may call spirit, universe, God, goddess. Allow your commitment and your passion to be guided by that. And take another breath. Let's breathe together again one more time. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. And welcome back to this moment of birthing the world that works for all. Well, as I said earlier, this is a space of co-learning. We're here to gain insights, and we're gonna do that by listening to one another. We're gonna be together for roughly another 53 minutes. And you may or may not have noticed that we invited you all to share some questions in advance of the town hall today. And some of you did send those, and Rep D has already seen them, and she will be speaking to them in a moment. We're also inviting you to share what comes up for you, and Rep D is going to speak about that as well. I do now want to formally introduce Reverend Deborah Johnson, Rev D, our beloved Rev D. She is the founding minister and president of Inner Light Ministries, and an omni-faith outreach ministry dedicated to teaching the practical application of universal spiritual principles to all of life's circumstances. A lifelong social justice activist, Rep D is a successful co-litigant in 2 landmark cases in California. One of them set precedent for the inclusion of sexual orientation in the state's civil rights bill. I can say a lot about Rep D. I can read about her all day, and I'm not gonna do that because I want you to have a chance to speak and share with her. I do wanna say that Rep D is a Pachamama Alliance Board Member as well, and she has been lovingly and relentless at holding our organization accountable to its mission and vision, particularly when it comes to social justice. And she guides us, she helps us stay, as I said, accountable to what we said we're gonna do. I'm honored to have Rep D with us here. Welcome, Rep D, and I'll let you take it away. And you're muted at the moment, Rep.
There we go. Greetings, everyone. So good to see everyone here. So looks like we've got over 200 people. That is something that is amazing. And it is terribly, terribly exciting. I've been doing a lot everywhere over the past few weeks. And it's good to see so many people coming back and hungry and saying, you know, I want more and I want to go deeper. When Mario approached me about, well, what might be something in addition that we might be able to do and to offer, you know, I said, I think that there have been a lot of what I call like talking heads, but that people have things that they're really wrestling with. And what I'm finding is that people want to kind of figure out how. They want steps. They want to be engaged. So I sort of left it at that, and I love the idea of a town hall. I think that's a good way to go about it. So some people had submitted some questions earlier. If you hadn't submitted any, take the time to write questions in the chats now. Josh and Maisa and Mario and some of the other staff there at Pachamama will be taking a look at these and helping to compile them and to feed them to me, because it's a little difficult for me to read the chats, and speak to you. But I want to frame my comments before I start answering questions in a bigger context. I've been a professional diversity trainer for many, many years in all kinds of environments, corporate, nonprofit, the military, you name it. And there is obviously a pregnant moment. There's something that's happening here. I liken it, I became a Trekkie late in life to Star Trek, and that idea of like the wormhole that happens in the galaxy, where there's this spatial opening and you don't know how long it's open, but if you can get through it, you're going to be catapulted literally light years beyond what you would have been in ordinary speed. And I think we're at one of those kinds of moments. In his book, Spontaneous Evolution, Bruce Lipton describes this well as a growth spurt. He says that the way that consciousness operates is kind of like human development, where your kid doesn't just grow evenly every month, every year, that they have these spurts. And when they have a spurt, there's something that happens where it's magnified. It happens at an exponential rate. And I think we're at this kind of place now in terms of human consciousness, and I'm glad to see so many people waking up. One of the things that first attracted me to the Pachamama Alliance was this notion about spiritual fulfillment, environmental sustainability, and social justice. Sometimes they have been referred to as pillars, but in my mind, they're intertwined. They are not separate pillars. And this point of accountability that Maisha has said that I've been relentless about for the past 10, 15 years isn't so much in my mind that I thought that Pachamama needed to do more about social justice above and beyond the other things that it was doing, but that if it didn't understand how social justice was fundamentally a part of the work that needed to be done, we weren't going to be successful in any of it. So I want you to breathe that in for a moment, that social justice is not a tangent. It's not an add-on. When the Achuar people first told Lynn and Bill Twist and John Perkins that if you come here to try to help us, save us, you need to just go back. But if you truly understand that your fate is intertwined with ours, then let's work together. But part of your work is going to have to be to go back to you, to go back to your people. Don't just be over here trying to help us. You need to go back and you need to awaken from a dream that you can't just deal with problems on the supply side. We have to deal with them on the demand side as well. Go back, awaken from your dream, whatever this is that you've been so caught up in that has you doing these kinds of behaviors that are putting the planet, particularly the rainforest in this particular instance, in the sacred headwaters, in such jeopardy. So we've been doing that, taking a look at things like our signature program, Awakening the Dreamer. But we have to go beyond that. That Awakening the Dreamer isn't just about stopping certain behaviors. If we're really going to end things at the demand side, we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing it in the first place? And even more, what even makes us think we have the right to do it? Just breathe that in for a moment. What makes us think we have the right to treat the planet like this? What makes us think we have the right to have a purely extractive relationship with the planet? Besides whatever desire that we may want to create out of products, what makes us even show up in this kind of relationship with the planet itself? Because that's what the Achuar and the indigenous people have been trying to teach us. They haven't been just trying to teach us change your economic systems, but change your relationship to life itself. Change your relationship to nature itself, so that you stop looking at nature as an it, as this separate thing, but you begin to feel yourself one and connected with it. I remember when I was being interviewed by Conda Mason. I went on a trip to the rainforest in 2011. And Conda is a filmmaker. She's been in the Pacha family for many, many years. She's led some of her own journeys. I went on a journey that was for social justice activists. And she was questioning me at the very end on camera. She said, "What did you learn?" And I looked at her and I said, "What I learned is that the Pachamama is my mama." I said, I didn't get it before. I didn't get that we are literally from the earth. Even though I was raised very fundamentalist, evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal, and it was right there in the sacred text that we read all of the time, from the dirt, from the clay, I didn't get it. It's like I didn't get it till then. The reason why it's important for us to understand this is that we're in such environmental devastation out of a false sense of hierarchy, out of a false sense of supremacy that puts human beings at the top of the food chain over everything, over the planet, the earth, or whatever. And this supremacy has tentacles. It doesn't just stop that human beings are over the planet, that this kind of supremacy that has led to the kinds of devastations that we're seeing now in the environment creates hierarchy and pecking orders within human beings itself. So you've got human beings that are over the planet, human beings that are over the animals, then you've got human beings that are over other human beings, and it goes on and on and on. And it is this underlying sense of the supremacy that has to be tackled. We have a tendency when we want to think of the isms, is we want to think of it as discrimination and not realizing that the discrimination is not the end. The discrimination is a means. The discrimination is a tool to the end. The reason why we have racism and the isms isn't to push some people down, it's to elevate other people. The point of patriarchy is not just to push women down. It subjugates them so that it builds up the women, and so it builds up the men. The price that the women pay is like collateral damage for a greater vision about the upliftment of what maleness is supposed to be. So just take a breath. It's the same way with everything. And if we're going to get this, we have to understand that it's a single footprint. It's footprint on the planet and footprint on the people. But it's the same footprint, the same consciousness that created environmental sustainability also is wreaking havoc on people. It's wreaking havoc on people. And there's no way that we're ever going to get to where we say we want to get without understanding that. In our work in the South, we get it. In our work in the South, we can't just save the rainforest without uplifting the indigenous people. You can't do it. The denigration of the people has been part of the tool to denigrate the land. But you can't denigrate the land without going through the people. And that if we're going to get anywhere on this, we have to partner and we have to listen. We can't just go in with a fix-it mentality and try to tell the indigenous people what to do and how to do it. We have to humble ourselves, listen to some of their wisdom, understand what the needs are, and partner in a different kind of way. And the same consciousness that we have brought to our work in the South, we need to bring to our work in the North. For some reason, we don't characterize it as social justice when we're talking about the work in the South, but it is. It is. It's profound work that shifts our relationships to each other and empowers people in different kinds of ways. And we're not rolling in there as the hero trying to save everything. We realize that we have to be in partnership. So I just want you to take another breath. Take another breath. I'm trying to be explicit here because so many of the questions that are being posed are coming from a fix-it mentality. Okay. They're coming from, take another breath. The racial supremacy comes out of a construct. And it's just a construct. That's all that it is. But it is a construct that was created for the purpose of supremacy. We didn't even use the term race. People were identified by their tribes. They were identified by their nationalities. And interestingly enough, still to describe race, we often use nationality. But this concept of race was a little bit different. Where it literally created these folks that were closer to God, who had right and authority and entitlement over the earth and over everybody else on the earth. That was part of the construct. And it was developed for economic reasons. So you can't separate out racism and classism. You can't separate out racism and money and economics because the construct itself was built for that. We keep hearing the president talking about this lawlessness in rioting and whatnot. Whenever you have these riots that are against police brutality, there's not a bunch of just lawlessness in the street. And I'm not condoning looting and everything, but the targets are very specific. The targets are always economic. People aren't burning down homes. They're not burning down churches and synagogues and mosques, places of worship. They are not burning down schools. They're not burning down the post office. They're not burning down theaters and venues. They're not burning down airports. It's very specifically commerce, places of commerce. And it is a political statement about that and about the capitalism and the materialism, but it's not lawlessness out of nothing. There is a connection in people's minds between the racism and the inequality economically, and both are being protested simultaneously. It's not a bunch of random stuff. So the moral of the story here is that if you really want to do this work, then get in it. You can't sit by on the sidelines above it and try not to feel it, because we can't feel what we don't heal. We can't heal what we don't feel. We have to feel it. And it's not a mistake that so many white people don't identify themselves as white, because that's part of the construct of whiteness. Part of its construct is to make it such that you don't see it. Because if you did, you'd be out in the streets like we've been in the past month. Now that it wasn't covered up anymore, now that it was in clear day, not under, not with people with hoods on, not in some backwoods, but out in the streets for everybody to see it, folks are enraged. But it's not new. This has been going on and going on and going, but just finally we're getting out of denial about it. And that's going to hurt, to see things that you haven't seen before, to have discussions that you haven't had before. But think of it like a family that's wounded. You can't go in unilaterally and fix the family. There's not even an answer to, well, what do we need to do to fix this family? You can only heal. And that takes engagement. And that takes involvement. And that takes love. And that takes caring. And that takes everybody carrying their own weight and listening and seeing things through different eyes and seeing things through different perspectives. And maybe what you thought was the best solution may not be what's going to work for everybody else. You don't know that. So yes, we can move forward, but it's probably going to be longer and messier and more ambiguous, less clear and defined than you may want. And welcome to the party. Welcome to the journey. This is where it begins. Not with quick solutions so you stop feeling bad, but how do I feel too? And how do I show up? I had to say that and put that in perspective. I didn't expect it to take so long, but I think that really needed to be said.
I think the comments are demonstrating that as well, that there was something that needed to be said. And with that said, would you like, Rep D, to go into some of the questions that you received? There's also some that are coming here. I'm collecting them. See if that would.
Sure. Why don't you read off a few of the ones that have been coming in?
Okay. So we have, and I apologize. Martha had asked if you can speak to anti-Blackness.
Okay, I want to hear a bunch of them at once.
Great. We have Terry Moon. Do you think that we need to eliminate capitalism in order to eliminate racism? And Holly has a comment. I have been in the streets activism for decades. I really relate to this, but a covenant of nonviolence and non-distraction has always been my covenant. the Black bloc is out there always with the diversity of tactics.
Mm-hmm.
How is it for you, Rep D, to see all these white faces? I thank you so much for being with us. And then Lori said, important issue, as a white woman, how do I show up?
Good. Well, all of these are really good questions. In my spiritual community, we have a practice we use called the Sufi Gates. Let all your words get to the gates. 1, is it true? 2, does it need to be said? And 3, can it be said out of love with kindness? Is it true? Does it need to be said? Can it be said out of love with kindness? And I've added a 4th gate. Does it really need to be said by me? So sometimes when you hear me pause, I'm just trying to get to the gates. I'm just trying to make it to the gates. One of the first things that I think has to happen is that if we're going to deconstruct this thing called race, we all have to be willing to stand in it. And I'm not even saying as a truism, but it's all in juxtaposition of everything else. It's all relational. So it's kind of like, what is tall? Tall isn't an absolute. Tall relative to what? If you're a male and you're 2 years old and you're 4 feet tall, you'd be tall. If you're a male and you're 65 and you're 4 feet tall, you wouldn't be considered tall. So I guess what I'm saying is like, get beyond whether it be good, bad, this or that, just like male, female, heterosexual, gay. We have all of these things, and they are experiences that we have. They come with rights and privileges and all the rest of these kinds of things. And we'll never really understand it until we're willing to be in it. Okay, so to deconstruct it, you can't deconstruct it from the outside. You can only deconstruct it from the inside. See, those who are holding those mantles have to let go of them. If you try to chisel it away from the outside, like we've been trying to do, it's like pruning a tree. You can cut it all the way back to the nubs, but the next season it's going to have fruit because the roots are so deep. So we have to be on the inside of it to be able to shift it and change it. And because the stuff is so painful, a lot of times people don't want to be on the inside. It's okay to be white. It's not a curse. It's not bad. You didn't have anything to do with it. It just is the way that we've organized this stuff now, and to be able to see how it fits within things is important. As a person of the African diaspora, I'm on the other end. The way this construct goes, once anything touches white, it stops being white. Black is on the far other end. Anything touches black, it's black. Why is Tiger Woods black when his mother's Thai? Why is Barack Obama black when his mother's white? So as a black person, we're very conscious of the fact Obama's half white. But it doesn't make him less black within the construct of black. But we understand that we're all these mixed things. We've got white. Look at my face. I got a lot of white. It just is. But for white people, you got to stop being ashamed of it. It's got to stop being a curse and something that you don't like and something that you're trying to get out of. It's okay. It's okay. And being colorblind doesn't help. Okay? If you're willing to stand in it, then you can see it. If you're willing to stand in it, then you can deconstruct it. Okay? But what we need from our white allies, first and foremost, is to heal whatever you got to heal to stop feeling guilty and stop feeling bad. We want you to own the privilege, not denounce it or deny it. Own it. Own it so that you can share it. Own it so that you can shift it. Own it so that you can change it. That's got to be number one. Okay? Take a breath. As far as anti-Black goes, whenever there's anti-anything, what is it pro? That's all I would ask you, is that whenever you hear anything's anti-anything, what is the pro and what is it that you're really trying to do and what is it that you're really trying to get at? Race is complicated because it's a construct. It's a social construct. But we don't have to, how can I put it? It's a context for our lives. It doesn't have to be its content. It's a context. It doesn't have to be its content. There were many of the questions that were about, like, what do I do? There isn't a single prescription. It's like some people need to speak up, some people need to shut up a little bit. You know, you'll know. What I'm asking each of you to do is to move beyond the shame and say, my life has value just the way it is, and everything about me, every hurt, every pain, every experience is of value. And open up wide to the universe, to the great spirits, the I am, God, like whatever you call it to be, the organizing principle in the universe, open up to that and say, use me. Where can I make the most difference? It could be in simple conversation. It could be at large policy making. Could be demonstrating in the streets. Could be just lending a helping hand. Could be all of the above. I don't know. But I promise you, if you open up and ask, you will be guided. I would like to recommend that everybody take a look at the Black Lives Matters website. It's brilliant. The amount of policies and actions and things that they have there and their deep intersectionality analysis, where they realize it's not just about race. It's about all these different issues. And most of the founders of Black Lives Matter define themselves as queer women because they sit at these intersections of sexual orientation and race and gender and class and being able to see the connection of those dots. So each of you has your own place that you can play. And be willing to do that. On the systemic level, and that's where most of us get caught up. On the systemic level, the first thing I'd say we have to do is get out of denial. It's just get out of denial because the differentials are there. I don't care what it is. Even in COVID-19, Black and brown people are contracting it 3 times as much, dying twice as fast. There's reasons for all of this. Don't make the racism about individual anything. And if you want to play at the systemic level, I invite everybody to play at that systemic level, but without the guilt and the shame. without the guilt and the shame. Because what happens is that, and I'm just being honest now, if I'm a person of color and you're coming at this with all this guilt and shame, I suspect that what you're really just trying to do is make yourself feel better, that you're just wanting to be absolved. And as the joke goes, ain't nobody got time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. Then it becomes about you again. So you can't heal something with the same consciousness that created it. So if racism was created to keep you on top, we can't end it by doing things to keep you comfortable, because it still puts your pain on top. So that's the biggest thing that I can say about what's stopping most of you towards the systemic stuff, is that you're coming at it from the wrong perspective. You're coming at it trying to not feel bad, or you're coming at it trying to be the hero, which, unbeknownst to you, is still putting yourself up and other people down. Do like we're doing with the Achuar. Just come to the table as one. Come to the table. It makes you ask different questions. Then you stop asking questions like, well, what do we do with all the homeless people? Why are there people without homes? That's another question. And that's where we want to get to. Not even when we talk about things like mass incarceration, it still has us looking systemically at the end result, the people in the prison. But if you want to help systemically, start asking the demand question. Why is there such mass incarcerating? Why does that exist? Who's benefiting from that? We know who's being hurt, but who's benefiting? And that's the coming out of denial piece that I don't find enough people doing in their analysis. Who's benefiting? And why? And how am I a part of that? Just breathe that in for a moment. How am I a part of that? Because most of this stuff is being done in the name of keeping white people safe, in the name of protecting your property, in the name of making certain that you're not harmed by all these quote unquote bad people, using your tax dollars in your name. And we can change that.
Thank you, Repti. Well, there's a few comments and questions. Interestingly, you've been addressing them as they come. There might be one that I want to present to you, and maybe in a moment we give space for one or two live questions. We'll ask, what are examples of owning privilege?
Sure. Give examples of owning privilege. Each of us has privilege, and you can't share it if you don't own it. Each of us has resources. Resources are privilege. Each of us has spheres of influence. Those are privilege. Each of us has places of visibility, or places where we're heard, we're respected. That's privilege. Having our lives and our stories told, that's another form of privilege. But the biggest privilege of all is when we don't have to think about stuff. Like, how many of you consciously if you were to talk about the top 4 or 5 things that matter to your life, how many of you would define yourselves as able-bodied? You know, when I do that exercise, how much does being able to see and to hear and to speak and to walk, to move, to be a certain height and a certain dexterity, how much a part of your life is that? You know, most people will say like 100%. Then why don't we even think to define ourselves as able-bodied? Because we don't have to think about it. Why don't we have to think about it? Because everything in society is made for us, so we don't have to think about it. Ever had to use a wheelchair? Ever had to use a crutch or braces or a cast? Didn't the world look a whole lot different then? You saw how high those steps were? You saw that door, how heavy it was to open up? You saw just how tall that cabinet was? It was a privilege to you before because it was constructed for you. And you didn't even notice it until you couldn't use it. See? But once you realize, oh, this being designed this way is a privilege for people like me, well, what if I didn't have this? Oh, some closed caption. Oh, a little ramp. Oh, this thing could be lowered a little bit. Oh, this could be a push button door. Oh, it's like all these, and I'm using in terms of physical infrastructure to show you how the privilege doesn't mean you're bad. It's just if you don't understand that it's been designed for you, then you're not paying attention to the fact that it's not going to work for other people who don't have whatever you have, who are like not like you.
Yeah. Well, with that, Rebbe, I think we can open it up for a couple of live questions. So I'd like to invite people to raise their hands digitally, and I'll call on you if you have a question. We'd love to also hear your voices. You know, get a little bit more of a feeling for who's out there.
There's a question there. It said, when somebody calls me a racist, I want to know what I did. Okay. Don't take it personally. Okay. If somebody calls you that, ask them, how did they arrive at that conclusion? Because there's probably a difference between your intent and the final impact. And newsflash, if somebody calls you a racist, they care about you. They actually trust you enough to think that the information matters to you and that you might actually do some introspection. If they really believed that you were actually a racist, they wouldn't be talking to you. But to come to you and say that this thing is racist, or they felt that there was racism here, what they are engaging you in the solution building. And they think that you have the capacity and to care enough to want to make a difference.
So true. I'm going to call Matt, who has a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is he Matt Perry?
Yeah, hello.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, hi, Rev D. I'm calling from Peru. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why you think it is that at this time in our species evolution that this nationalist agenda seems to be taking over many parts of the world.
You know, it's predictable. Okay? For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Okay? That it's the way there's the balance that happens in nature. So even in your own personal life, the moment you start moving towards, say, recovery from alcoholism, all the things that were pulling you to be an alcoholic start to come up. Everything unlike what we're trying to be has to come up to be healed. So it's like the last throes, because there is this effort that's been happening. And even the language of take it back shows they thought they lost it. That there's been so much change towards equality and interfaith and multicultural and diversity and global citizenship. There's been so much of that that it's whittling away the traditional divides. And the way you can keep the isms going is you have to have the othering. And the moment you start mixing it all up together, you lose the supremacy. So you have to have this nationalism. You have to have this stuff to keep you on top if you want to deal with the old status quo measurements. This reminds me of something that Martin Luther King Jr. said. He said, the days of segregation are over, we can be certain of it. The only thing uncertain is how costly the segregationists will make the funeral. And that's where we're in now. The days of supremacy, racial supremacy, national supremacy, religious supremacy, it's over. The only question is how costly the supremacists will make the funeral. And that's what we're in now. The last of the throes, we got to hospice this stuff right on out as we birth a new world.
Thank you, Rebbe. I have, Holly is asking us if you can say more about othering.
Yes. The only thing that ever needs to be healed is just the sense of separation. Period. Separation from our good, our wealth, our health, each other, the divine. That sense of a whole. And too often we try to heal that by going outside. That's where mass consumerism is. Advertisers are playing off of this kind of existential feeling within too many of us that something's missing, that I'm not whole, like right where I am. And othering is that process of being anti-oneness. Othering is that process of creating us and them, you versus me. But most of the time, the othering is done with a one-up, a supremacy, a superiority, that the way that I feel higher about myself is by putting you down. And this othering, where you try to classify people into mutually exclusive categories, allows you to control them and allows your group to own the finest qualities that make for your society. So these other people are down here in juxtaposition, the illegal aliens versus the law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. You know, this deep, as though one has all the virtue and the other has none, which justifies the harm. Which justifies the harm because it's a dehumanizing process. And when you really feel the full humanity of people, you cannot hurt them. When you feel your own humanity, you cannot hurt them. The oppression hurts the oppressor as much as the oppressed, because it robs you of your decency and your humanity and your connection and your sense of safety.
I'm gonna invite one more in the last question. That's from Krista McAtee, and Krista, you can speak to it.
The Sufi Gates, while she's doing that, somebody asked about the Sufi Gates. Is it true? Does it need to be said? Can it be said out of love with kindness? And I added the fourth one. Does it need to be said by me?
Okay, and can we unmute Krista? There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I was just wondering if you could speak to the power of affinity spaces in creating opportunities for us to do this work.
Affinity spaces are absolutely necessary. And to me, it is the most skipped step. So what an affinity space is, it's a time for autonomous organizing. And it is absolutely necessary for groups to get together within their own, not for the purpose of staying there, but for the purpose of exploration, of feeling, of deconstructing, of developing an agenda, of learning where you sit vis-a-vis like all the other people. So men need men's space. You know, the Me Too movement is not going to get where it needs to go until men are in the streets. Just like with the Black Lives Matters movement, people shouting Black Lives Matter are really saying white supremacy has to go. Men have got together with men, because if women are in the room, it's not going to happen. White people need their own space. Please, please take the space, particularly in a society and a culture that wants to make you blind to being white, shame you for being white. Then everybody's colluding by the inaction. The complicity becomes consensus. And there are books like White Fragility, Waking Up White. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I highly, 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 highly recommend it. You cannot get there without it, I'm telling you. I've been in so many movements. And even now in the Pachamama Alliance, we've been doing that for the past year. We've been doing White Fragility. I've been facilitating the people of color. Noel Poncelet has been facilitating the white people, and then we get together. We have our own, and we get together. Very necessary.
Thank you. I think that was a wonderful last insight. Unfortunately, our time is up, but really, thank you everyone for engaging, for saying yes, for staying open, curious. This is really important. I know that there's a more important space than to be in dialogue and open and curious. So thank you, Repi. Thank you, everyone. Before I give you the mic back, Repi, for final reflections, I do want to remind everyone that on July 20th, we're going to have Lynn Twist host and space a panel with advocates for social justice. You'll receive more information in your inbox as the time gets closer. And the one thing I want to say is it's something Angela Davis said that I keep in my heart. She said, you have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time. So onward. Thank you, everyone. Please, Repi, you can close for us, and we'll stay a little longer after Repi finishes. Thank you very much.
Well, I just want to say to everybody, once again, thank you for the engagement. Keep hope alive, your heart open, possibility consciousness, and the engagement. I'm teaching a lot, and I'm going to be on a lot of different webinars, even this week. You can go to my Facebook page. Reverend Deborah Johnson. Tomorrow and Wednesday and Thursday, I'm actually starting a new session on Thursday in sacred race relations, in talking about moving forward, how we've learned from nature how to do this. So I invite you to, check it out, or give me a little holler at revdeborahjohnson@gmail.com, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
Thank you again for saying yes, Rev D, for continuing to stay with us and guiding us in this journey. Love to you, love to everyone. We'll see you next time. We'll hang out here so you can say goodbye on the chat. You all, thank you again. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.